So in this one, we are going to be setting up our background image to work exactly like it does on swiftforentrepreneurs.com. And if we change the size of it, it does actually, the location of it changes just slightly. So it's always in the center. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is go ahead and go into Sublime Text. And in our templates, we're going to make a brand new template. And I'm going to call it do not use.html. Because we're not going to actually end up using it, and I'm just calling it do not use because I'm just going to leave it on there so you guys can see it once it's done. But once we actually go through this process, then we're going to add it into our homepage and how it's going to work with all that. So for now, we'll just go do not use.html. All right, and then I'm just going to copy all of base.html and paste it in here, and then I'm just going to delete some stuff. So delete everything from body all the way up to body, right? So you want to make sure you have these two tags here. If you accidentally deleted one, that's okay, you just add it in. And then I'm going to delete all this, delete everything within style. I'm going to leave the Bootstrap style sheets in, so all this stuff I'm going to leave in, and then I'm going to get rid of that. All right, so I'm just going to call this background image. Okay, so now we're going to be working with the background image of this body. So we need an image. Go ahead and jump into Google. I already did a search for beach, and I just click on images, and then what I want to do is actually go to search tools, size, large. You could also do an exact size or larger than. So if you did an exact size, that's actually a good idea in some cases, but we're not going to just jump into everything about it. I just want large. And then I'm going to grab this picture right here, go to view image, and then save image as. And I've already saved it on my project folder for image, right? So I'm going to save it in there again. I'll just replace it. So now I have this beach image that I can use. So in our view here, let's actually just go ahead and load in that image. So I'll do image, or excuse me, in our HTML, we'll do image source, and I'll do static, and it's image/beach.jpg. So that's the source of the image. That's where it's coming from. Oh, I need to put quote or single quotes on the outside. So if you put double quotes on the inside, you want to have single quotes on the outside, and vice versa. Double quotes on the outside, you want to have single quotes on the inside. That way, it's definitely going to render okay. So since we have this, now it's pretty much all set up that we will be able to actually see this image. So what we want to do is create a view so we can actually see this HTML, or have a view that uses this HTML. So in lwc.views or lwc-views.py, we're going to just make a test home. So I'm going to uncomment out home and call it test home, and change the template to do not use. Okay, so then in my URLs, I'm going to copy this one and call it test home, and change this to LWC, test home, and test home. Eventually we'll delete this line, but for now we're just going to leave it. So save it and go into your project, make sure it's running, of course, and then we want to go test home. All right, so now we see that this giant image is coming through. Okay, so it's actually showing up on our project, which is good. This is what we want to see, but we want it to be in the background, right? So like if you're trying to select the image back here, but you can't actually select it with your cursor, where if you do it here, you actually can select it, as noted by that little document there. See, right, I can't select it. I can select text, but not the background image. So this is a background image property that we will be adding into our HTML. So in body, this is what we'll do, is we'll add a background image here. So in our styles, you can have an external style sheet for this, but we can also just do body, and then we do background image, and we set a URL, and of course that URL is going to be this right here, static URL, and then we close it off. So we save that and do a refresh in here. Notice that the image is now just a little bit extended, but let's actually get rid of the image that I have, this one right here, just so we can see it a little bit better. And there we go. So now we have that background image working, and if you notice, you can't actually scroll on it, right? It doesn't allow you to scroll. I can't move over at all because it's now no longer the image, it's just the background image. Now if I change the size of the browser, the image will start to show up more depending on how big your screen is, but it's really not changing the way we want it to. We want it to be in the center, and we want some other stuff here. But let's actually play around with background image a little bit more. So I'm going to go back into my search for beach, and I'm going to go to search tools, and this time I'm going to do like medium or larger, or excuse me, let's do icon. Let's use icon. I'm going to use this small little image, view image, and I'm just going to, I'm going to use this image. Looks like Google had a little broken link there. But I'm just going to go ahead and copy this link URL right here. And I'm going to paste it in here. Or actually, I'll just add another background image attribute here and do URL. Okay. And if I go back in here and refresh, notice that this background image is now gone and the other one's there. It's repeating. Cool. So what we want to do then is background repeat and say no repeat. Do a refresh. There we go. So now it's actually there. So as far as background image is concerned, this is actually kind of cool. So I can do X repeat, not X repeat, but repeat X, and do a refresh, right? So this is going to repeat it all the way on the X axis. So that's going to go all the way down. And if we do Y, it's going to repeat it on the Y axis. So that will go all the way down as well. And let's just kind of see that. So I'll just say body, and I'll add a minimum height of, let's say, 1,000 pixels. And then I refresh in here. Now I can actually scroll, so I can see that. Or if I did 5,000 pixels, I can actually scroll all the way down, and you see that it's now repeating. And if we did minimum width of 5,000 pixels and change this to X, we can see that we can scroll over here too, right? So kind of cool. So now I'm actually going to comment this out with command slash, and then I'm also going to do repeat command slash and minimum and maximum height command slash. So if I refresh in here, we've got that big image back again. Okay, cool. So there's one more thing that we can do. We actually don't have to do our background image like that. We could actually just do background property, so just background, and then we could just add in our URL. So if we add in our URL in here, and then we can also say no repeat this way. So this is just a shortcut, so we don't have to write out background repeat. And then I'm going to add a couple other ones, center, center, and fixed. So this is center, this is making it center, and this is also removing a scroll. I'll give you some references for this so you can look at it later. And now I can get rid of this. Command slash. And we'll do a refresh in here. Notice that it actually just now changed the image itself into the center. So now this is the center of the image, and it actually moved its location, right? It changed it from center to center to center. Okay, so there's one more thing that we actually need to do, which is we need it to cover, or the background size needs to actually cover the part that it's in, basically. So we'll just do background size, and we'll call it cover. Okay. And we refresh, and now the picture itself is getting a little bit closer to actually fitting into what we need. There is something that I do want to mention here, is there's called vendor prefixes. So depending on what browser you're on, this cover right here, just this cover attribute or style, it won't actually work on all browsers without doing the vendor prefix. So like WebKit and background size being cover, and then Moz or Mozilla background size being cover, and, or not conver, but cover. And then last but not least, we would do O for Opera, background size being cover. All right, so this would cover different browsers. That's all that this is doing, because generally it's not necessarily, background size won't necessarily work in especially older browsers. Now the newer ones, background size might work fine, but the older ones might not necessarily work, so we just wanted to add that in there. So if we save and reset, refresh, then we see the image, and notice it actually changes with the size very well, right? So it does change. Notice that it is cropped a little bit depending on where you're looking at it, because its natural size is really big. But since we added these attributes of center, that means the center of the image will be in the center of the page, basically, at all times. So depending on how big the image is and how you set it up, that's how it's going to look. It might be cropped off on the top a little bit. So yeah, that's it. And notice that I can now actually try and select stuff, and it won't work. So let's go in here, and I'm just going to write H1, hello world, and do a refresh in here. Notice the text is actually there, and the background image is showing up. Cool, so that's fairly straightforward, right? I mean, it's not really that complicated. And then as far as the reference, you can use W3 schools, their background property. There's other attributes and values that you could go through here and kind of see how all this stuff works. And just play around with it on your own. So if you go and try for yourself, this is a way to just play around with different code and the different attributes that are associated to CSS. I really recommend W3 Schools because they have a lot of stuff on here that just allows you to jump and try things out. And I use it as a reference from time to time myself. All right, so with that in mind, let's actually now move this over to our home page instead of just being on our do not use page. So I'm actually going to copy this style stuff. And in home, we want to do block styles. So I'll do block styles and then in block. And we're going to paste that in. Let's actually look at our base to make sure that we have a block styles, and we don't. So let's go ahead and do block styles here in block. And notice that the style tag is here, where on our home page we have the style tag in there. So this is kind of up to you how you want to do this. Like, you can actually leave this out and keep it like this, block styles. The reason you would do something like that is because then syntax checking would be there, and it would also allow auto-completing. Now, if we took away these style tags, it's going to be white like this. It's not going to allow style checking or syntax checking at all, where we would move it back into that style block, and then that's how it would actually work. But you know, you might want to actually be able to check your styles, so go ahead and just do that. And just make sure your blocks are associated and they are in the right position. Okay, so now we have this image, and I'm also going to get rid of this test home. I'm just going to comment that out because we are not going to use it anymore. And then I'm going to close out do not use. All right, so now that we have this, we have our body, and notice that I put the block styles after all the other styles that I have on base.html. So now that we have this, if we go into our home page, we should see that background, and we do, right? So it's actually below that first text there, which is cool, and that's actually what we want to see. So hello, welcome home. Let's actually add that min height back and see what that does. So we can actually check out, so I just commented out min width. So we can actually check out what this image looks like. Okay, cool. So it actually does work, right? So if I change the size of it, it will change along with it. Great. So now we can actually get rid of these lines, right? We don't actually need those lines anymore. So on our home page, the HR lines can go away. So HR right here. And then I believe the other HR line will be with the footer somewhere. So like if we scroll down, yes, we see it with the footer in the footer container. And we refresh, now we see that those lines are gone. Cool, so that's actually looking a little bit closer to like what we see here, right? So if we look at this, now when I scroll, the image is there, but well, we don't have gray and white. It's not actually looking exactly the same. So let's go ahead and start doing that. What I'll do now is on my footer container, I'm just going to add a style of, let's say, color of gray. Okay, so if I add, not color, but sorry, background color of gray. So now we see that. Well, that's okay, but we actually want the div container to be full. We want it to go all the way across. So to do that, all we're going to do is div class row. So we're going to add a row container around the footer container. Okay, and then I'm going to add style equals to margin top being 80 pixels. Just want to make sure that it has a top margin on that row. Go back in here and do a refresh, and we see that, hey, it moved down, but it doesn't seem like it's going all the way across. So let's make sure that it is by changing the background color for it to gray. And if we refresh now, we see that it is going across. That background image is still really big, and that's because if we go to home.html, we have the body tag being a minimum height of 5,000. So if we get rid of that, that's going to change and move the background or the footer actually to the footer. So if we now add new stuff in between the footer and also whatever content we want to have here, we can do that. I'm also going to add text align center, and then padding. I'll add a, sorry, not a padding, but margin padding 20 pixels. So that's going to give it padding all the way around it. If I refresh, I now see that it's there. Cool. So that looks good. Obviously, you could change company to whatever you want. And then this HR line is still there. So let's see what's going on with that. Looks like I might have accidentally brought that back. Okay, so there we go. And now what we can do is add a new row. So underneath this container, I will add a new row for it. So I'm going to copy this, and I'll do div class of row and div class column small 12 div, and then I'm going to add a background color of white. Okay, just add that stuff, and we see hello is here. So that margin, what that's doing is it's separating these two and making this big gap here. So that's what that gap is coming from. So if I go into inspect element here, and I see that there's this container, but then this row is making that big margin. So if I took off that top margin, it would bring it down and allow for that area actually to go away. So depending on how you actually want this to look, you might want that little gap there, or you might not. So I'm going to leave it there just in case you do want it, but I might even actually add it up to being like 200 pixels. So that way at the very end, you see still some of the beach. I know it's a little bit different than what we see on Coding for Entrepreneurs, but Swift for Entrepreneurs, but I just wanted to show you that it can be done this way. So now for this row we just added, we want to add a margin of top and bottom. So it actually has some spacing between that and also the one above it, the form above it. So what we'll do here is I'm going to add a margin of 80 pixels for top and bottom and 0 pixels for left and right. So if I refresh in here, now it's actually moving it down. And then we can also add a minimum height of 500 pixels, or maybe not 500, but 200 pixels. Refresh, and now we see that this stuff is actually starting to come together, right? So now we see that there's the image, we have hello here, and then last but not least, there's that little gap there. But also, mainly what we see is that the actual image in the background is coming through and it's working correctly, and it's working the way we want it to as well. Just in general. So that's something that's kind of nice about this, is it's allowing us to use that parallax, so that image is in the background just like what we see here. And then what we still want to do is add this blue line on top. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add a black line though, and I'm only going to put it on home. So what I'll do is I'll say border top is 4 pixels. It's solid. And we're going to use black, so 999 is what I'll use. Well, I have gray now, and it just adds that little line there. Right, so just that little line adds like a nice little style to that top part, right? It just adds just a little bit, right? A little bit more than just all white, right? And of course you can put whatever color. So if you go to inspect element here and you wanted that top color to be something different, you could change it to being something different, right? So let's actually make it a little bit of like an orange color. So I'm going to use that one right there. And refresh. There we go. So now we've got that. That's looking good. And then down here, we want to add in all of this stuff. And that's fairly straightforward to do.